Can you buy a 1992 Firehawk for $5,000? Well, that's an easy answer. No, you can't. But if you had a $5,000 budget, could you build yourself a Firehawk?
This is our first budget build review on the channel. This happens to be my personal car that I was able to build for $5,000. Now let me explain the budget. I took $5,000 out in cash and put it to the side to do this project. I was able to buy this car, and I also bought 4 other parts cars to build this car. I was able to get the parts I needed and sell the rest of the parts for a profit. After I sold the original drivetrain and parted out those 4 cars, I added $3,700 to the budget. So when I go around and start telling you the prices of the things I've done to the car, they will add up to more than $5,000. But I never had more than $5,000 out of my pocket for this build.
Let's talk about the project. I found this 1989 Firebird Formula on eBay. It did not sell. I also found it on Craigslist afterwards, contacted the seller, and after a few weeks of negotiation, we worked out a price of $3,000. When I picked the car up, appearance-wise, this is how it looked. He had added the Rona wheels and the 91-92 Firebird front bumper. He did, however, not have the rear bumper. I had that part on hand, had it painted, and installed. The engine and transmission were all original. Everything on the car worked. I even drove the car home from outside of Nashville to St. Louis on cruise control. It was a great platform to start with and build into what I was looking for. Let's talk performance of the Firehawk. The original Firehawk came out with a 350 horsepower V8, a 6-speed manual, and a Dana 44 rear end. The T-Ram that the original Firehawk came out with is very expensive, and I could not get that intake on a budget. I chose the LT1 platform. It was much easier to put in here than an LS1 based engine, plus the LS1 would put me out of my budget range. The engine you see here is actually the second engine in the car. The original engine we had in the car only lasted about 1,000 miles before it failed. It came out of a 97 Ram Air with 170,000 miles on it. The one you see now is a built 383 stroker with forged pistons and rods, trick flow specialty heads, and an Edelbrock air gap intake. I was able to buy this engine off of Craigslist, freshly rebuilt, sat for 4 years in the guy's garage, and I gave him $2,500 for it. I wanted the car to look original when you opened the hood. That's why I let it retain its original wiring harness, and I put all the LT1 wiring buried underneath and hidden out of the way. I put the computer in its original location and spliced the 2 looms together to make this car work. What does a 400 horsepower LT1 sound like?
When I bought this car, it had the original interior in it. The seats were ripped, the dash pad was cracked, the headliner was sagging, and the carpet was pretty bad. To remedy this, I bought new headliner and new carpeting. I waited for sales that I could get these at a discounted rate and shipped to my door. As far as the dash pad and the seating and center console goes, these were all from parts cars that I bought to amass the parts for this car. All in all, the interior came out pretty nice. But as you can see, the driver's seat doesn't match. I sent that seat out to get fixed because the bolster was ripped and did not make it back in time for this filming. This is no show car. It has a 15-foot paint job and plenty of flaws, but it is a great driver. You can hop in and go to the store or drive it across the country. Everything on the car works. All the original gauges, the AC, the heat, even that annoying buzzer that goes off when you open your door with your key in the ignition. But there is one thing I do like most about this car. It is a lot of fun to drive. Let's get a little more in depth with the build. Here I have a list of all the costs I've had and how I never had more than $5,000 out of my pocket.
The original car here cost me $3,000. I then scoured Craigslist and found a 1978 Datsun that a gentleman put an LT1 and a T5 5-speed in as a project. He never finished the project, and I was able to buy the whole car, engine and transmission for $500. I then sold that Datsun body for $600. I set the engine and transmission in this car, we cut out the floor and hooked up the hydraulics for the 5-speed. At the same time, I got on Craigslist and found a wiring harness, a computer, cooling fans, radiator, and mass airflow for the LT1 for $145. Once I started getting into it, I realized I didn't have the accessory drives or any of the accessories for the LT1, and trying to get all those things individually was going to cost too much. At that point, I decided to sell the engine and transmission and buy a 1997 WS6 Trans Am parts car. I was able to get $1,300 for the engine and transmission. I bought the parts car for $1,800. I sold some parts off that parts car for $1,000. By the time I had the subframe connectors, the headers, the plug wires, the fluids, all that stuff you need for a conversion, I had added another $1,000 to cost. The car at this point was running and driving, and at this point I decided to go ahead and finish off the body and the interior to make it really look the part. The rear bumper I already had, but it was $250 to have the rear bumper painted to match. The interior, since I had the seats out of the WS6, all I needed to pay for was the headliner and the carpet. And I was able to buy those on sale and have them both shipped to my door for $600 for the set. At this point, I found a 1988 Formula parts car for $175 that I bought just for the cluster because it had the 140-mile-an-hour speedometer in it. I sold the rest of that parts car for $900. The engine out of the WS6 car only lasted about 1,000 miles before it decided to give up on me. So at this point, I had to make a decision. I thought I'd go ahead and just build my own engine. When I went to the machine shop, got the cost of the rotating assembly, cost of the cam and all that, I was going to be out more than $6,000 even with me assembling the engine. This was not going to work on my budget. So at this time, I found a 1989 GTA that had a built small block, 6-speed transmission, and a built 373 posi rear end. I bought the car for $1,500 and drove it home. My car was already set up for an LT1, so I wanted to continue to have the LT1, so I went ahead and sold the engine for $1,600. I kept the transmission and the rear end. And to my surprise, when I started looking at the car closer, they had put the 1LE brake upgrade on that car. So I kept that and put that on this car as well. I was able to sell the body of the GTA for $500, and there was another $200 worth of parts I sold off the GTA between selling the engine and selling the body. At this point in time, I scoured Craigslist again. I found a 1995 Camaro LT1 that a guy had built into his stroker. Had forged pistons and rods, truck full of specialty heads, roller rockers, and it was all assembled by a machine shop. He had this done over 4.5 years prior to me buying it. When he got the engine back from the machine shop, his car started having some clear coat issues and he gave up on it. I bought that engine from him 5 years after being built for $2,500. We brought the engine home, put it in the car. There was a few miscellaneous costs. I had to get a new opti, some more new fluids and everything else. But that engine went in, and that pretty much had completed the car at this point. I also got a perfect dash pad out of that 89 GTA that I had. So you can see I got a lot of high dollar parts for no cost, plus making some money. And that's what's great about budget billing. You have to kind of get creative. How can I do this? How can I do that? My daughter and I built this car together. It was great. She learned a lot and she did a lot. We have a lot of time. We have a lot of new experiences. But that's kind of what budget building is. In order to create a budget build, you got to do the work yourself. That's where the big costs of these projects come into play. If you have a budget build that you would like me to review, I will leave my email in the link below. I'm still new at this, and I hope I get better as we go along. If you want to find out if I get better or I get worse, feel free to subscribe and like. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving this week.